we're going to talk about the cabinet first off. I've actually got a real cab here. It's a normal cab, it's not a wide body cab. And for me personally, I just like the form factor of a normal standard size cab. An original cab is built with, extreme amount of quality, really good plywood. It's really sturdy. You're not going to have any issues with it, but it is a set size that you have to work with. But you just need to think about, like I did, what is it going to be? Standard, wide body. Why? For me, I really wanted standard. I just feel like I can play it. I don't know, it's just playing pinball, I need that sort of width. If I go from this machine to my other machines and back again, it just feels right. So that's really important for me. The other thing is that with the solid build that you get in a real pinball table, the legs have some movement in them. And I'm sure you could replicate this in your own builds as well, guys, but real pinball tables, you lean on them and you move with them. And when you get into doing lots of nudging and stuff, and that becomes such a critical or a huge part of the gameplay, having that ability to move the table on its legs and with the right weight of the table and everything, it's hard for me to explain, guys, but I'm sure you guys out there that do nudge on real pinball tables, you know what I mean. There's some movement in that. And that might be sometimes difficult to replicate on your own cab if you have built it yourself, so you do need to consider that. There's a few other subtle things on this build that I did. I changed the side rails. So the side rails on a typical 78 are a lot fatter, which is like the ones that are on my Firepower. I changed them for the skinnier ones that you would actually find on a 90s DMD machine. One of the other things, guys, is the lockdown bar. I think out of all the things I've talked about in relation to the cabinet is the most important. So I think even if you built your own, having a real lockdown bar is crucial, absolutely crucial, guys. And that's because when you've got your hands on the side, it's just so smooth and it sits so nicely in the corner of your hands when you're playing. And there's nothing worse than trying to play pinball just on a piece of wood or a sharp corner on the edge of your table. So the other things on this machine, I have a topper, which is, I think it's a fishtails topper, that one, and I've got some custom things in there that was themed around Theatre of Magic when I started. And a topper's a nice idea, and I've rigged up some of my lighting to duplicate what goes on the play field around the side here up into the topper, and that makes actually quite a nice effect. And then around the DMD, I've got a belly marquee around there. The speakers I haven't put up, and I need to put those up, although the speaker system will change with this build. So that's a nice addition, and it's just a piece of plastic I got. I don't know where I got that now, just to sort of cover that up. But anyway, it's a nice combination. It works really well with the back glass. So I think that's all. Oh, one final thing, actually, I do have a little reflection protector thing here for the DMD, because if you don't have that, I've got a real DMD in here and it is super bright. It doesn't show in the camera, guys, it just doesn't. But the brightness of that is such that it reflects off the glass quite badly. And I can show you here, if you're down low, you can see sort of where it reflects. Now, if I don't have this little protector thing here, then of course that's just glaring on there and that's no good. So you need to think about that if you are using a real DMD, or at least an LED DMD, which is what I have. So what am I doing in terms of changes? If you think about all those things, guys, with your own build, what am I doing in terms of changes? The first thing is that, funnily enough, I built this table and it's flat. It's flat because it doesn't actually have to be raised up. And you might think that's not a big deal, but funnily enough, the angle of your hands as you're standing on the lockdown bar changes when the table's flat, as opposed to being slightly on an angle. And just the whole look of the cabinet is also a little bit off compared to a real one. So for me, I'm going to jack up the back legs and get this thing on a nice angle and make it look like it sort of fits in with all the other machines. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition the back box, because right now this back box is actually brought forward. So I wanted it back, but because of that, it's short. I could have opted to have a big gap down the other end, and that wouldn't work so well. So there's a couple of things in that in relation to this build change, guys, that I'm going to resolve. I'm going to get a bigger screen. I'm going to get a 43-inch, and I'll talk about how we're going to get that in the cab later. But that's bigger, and so it's going to be a little bit longer. A 43-inch the actual screen size is exactly the length of my Firepower screen and width, except for the bottom part of the apron. And so what I'm going to do, guys, is this. Let me show you. I don't know if anyone has actually done this. One of my crazy ideas. So this bottom part of the apron here, the addition of this part plus the screen from here upwards is exactly the size of a standard cab. And I thought, well, if I'm upgrading and getting this thing improved, I want to try and get the closest possible form factor for the screen. So what that means, guys, is this, I picked this up. It's actually from a sorcerer machine, not my sorcerer machine, but got it on eBay, and I've also got the little plunger lane. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on top of the screen. And I'm going to have the screen start from under here, like probably just underneath this curve here. And that way I've got this extra piece, and then the screen starts. And of course, whatever's on the screen and the sides for the particular table, I'm going to lose. I'm not going to see that. But the rest of the screen, in terms of the table that I select, is going to be shown as normal. And that means I get a perfect aspect ratio for a standard cab. Look at this. We have good old Windows doing its thing. It's a great reason to upgrade. So guys, anyway, that's what I am going to do. This is going to be pretty unique. And this requires me to still have the screen set down when I place that in and install it. But I reckon, and I'm hopeful, that this will turn into some nice changes to make this even more realistic. Now the other thing is, with that back box, I will get it raised back up again with the little piece in between once it goes back on its 4 bolts. And when I do that, I'll have the opportunity, I'll have to create a new piece of wood because I smashed out years ago. And what I'm going to do is create a gap in there and put a Connect in there. And later on we'll talk briefly about Connect and being able to have that pseudo 3D effect with head tracking in some software. So it's going to be a really nice place to actually build that into the cab. So I'm definitely going to do that as well. Probably need to test it first to make sure that I really want to go through the effort with that. So that will probably be along the journey. All right, we are back in. Let's get on to our next topic. Right, so the next topic is buttons and controls. Well, what have I got set up here? Well, I have a standard start button, extra ball, exit. I have a launch button. My insert credit button, guys, I actually use the reject button on the front of the coin door there, so I've got that actually wired up. It's a nice sort of subtle way to be able to just push that to get a credit in for those tables that you haven't set up with free play. The flippers on the side in the standard place, they are leaf switches. I'd certainly recommend that over micro switches. Don't get micro switches for your flippers, guys. They need to be leaf. It just feels so much nicer. And underneath that I've got the MagnaSave buttons for some tables, of course, and I purposely put them in the location that they're at so that my hand can swing down easily in an arc to get at them. The other button I do have securely tucked away underneath the cab is in the normal button where the switch would be. It's just a nice way to turn on the PC, easy enough. I have the Virtual Pin plunger. It's the version 2 of it. I've had problems with it. I've had problems with it in the past. I've had a couple of replacements. It took a long time, but this was years ago, guys, and there's actually a version 3 out now, so maybe that's a lot better. Unfortunately for me, when I use the plunger, it goes spastic. So it doesn't just go back nicely, and it just starts flicking around and stuff as if it's having problems tracking. I've tried lots of different things with it. I thought it might have been the sensor inside. I've tried lots of things. I can't seem to get it going. Anyway, so I do have a replacement from Zeb's boards. I'm going to try out his particular solution, but again, maybe the version 3 of the Virtual Pin 1 is better. I am not sure. Regardless of that, I have opted for both the launch button and a real plunger. One of the cool features, and I'm not sure if it's available on the Virtual Pin version 3 board, is that you can actually push the plunger in to do a normal launch. You know, that slap, the ability to slap the plunger. you can do that as like a launch press. So you could actually get away with just a plunger and be able to do that. In terms of my changes, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to replace that plunger with the Z boards one. I haven't got a launch ball light. I never got that in, so I'm going to want to put that light in, and it should flash through the DOF framework. It should flash for tables that actually use launch. That would be a nice addition. I also want the lights on the flipper buttons and the MagnaSave. And my extra ball button, I've had problems with it. I'm not sure if it's just the wiring, and I just haven't got around to fixing it, and it hasn't been lighting up, I don't think, when an extra ball is available. So I need to get that. That's more of a fix than anything. So I did have that going. So that's pretty much it in terms of controls and buttons. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is on to the back box screen. And for this, there's not too much to say, because I must admit I am absolutely 100% happy with the screen, even though it's really old. It's not high res at all. In fact, it's not even doing 1080. It's doing like, what, 1260 or something. The reason why I chose a 32-inch, for me, I really wanted edge-to-edge back glass, and you can see this is edge to edge. Now with bezels today and the screens, they're so thin that you could probably get away with just putting in like a 32-inch and it should fit in there. Now this particular setup with the back box, of course, I've got the DMD sort of laid out in a very similar way to a real machine. Of course, not quite the same in terms of the way the aspect ratio is, and you have to deal with that. Some people, you know, if you don't have a real DMD, you might have a screen-based DMD, and I've seen some people just have like just a bigger screen at the bottom to put their DMD on, which is cool. No problems with that. And of course, some of the later pinball machines now have actually that same sort of setup, so it looks very similar to some of the latest Stearns and other manufacturers that are making that sort of setup with larger screens. So I don't think it's a big thing, guys. I think it's a personal preference in the way that you want it. I play a lot of 90s DMD stuff, which is the main things that are available right now. So this sort of setup for me, I like in terms of the back box setup. But again, I think it's up to you. In terms of that back glass screen, am I going to change anything? No. That's one area of the pinball cabinet I'm 100% happy with. So when we get down to the next thing, we're going to talk about the DMD. Now the DMD that I have in here is currently a Pin DMD 2, the non-colour version. And I always refer to it as a real DMD, but it's actually not a real DMD per se. Not like the gas plasma ones that you actually get in a 90s machine like we have here on the Theatre of Magic. It's an LED equivalent. The ironic thing about it is it's actually better, I think, than the real one, because the luminosity of it is so much brighter. It's definitely brighter than the gas plasma. For me, going forward, what am I going to do? Well, as much as I absolutely love that, I want to go colour, because there's so many tables now where you can get colour on the DMDs, and I'd love to do that and have the tables more themed with various colours. So the Pin DMD 3 or Pin 2 DMD colour, both of those are new colour options from different people, and I am going to look at both of those and see which one will be the replacement. The big one, guys, the big one, we are now going to start talking about the playfield. The playfield. Wow. So as I said, this is a 39-inch. I can't remember the brand, guys. This is years ago. You certainly wouldn't be able to get it now, and I don't think you'd want to anyway. The angle of display is not too bad. I had to play with the settings a lot. It was pretty rubbish out of the box. But it's also, you know, it's 39-inch. It's got a bezel around it. It's not quite the size that I would like. 43 is definitely better. But it's done the job. It's 1080p. It's done the job. But I think the biggest thing that is hurting the experience on the table right now is the fact that it is causing a lot of input lag. And this is the thing, guys, is there's a number of considerations you need to look at when you're looking at monitors. But the TV specifications in general, though they got a lot better recently, is there wasn't a lot of concern around this concept of input lag. And what input lag tends to do is what it actually suggests, which is when you hit a button, your screen movement isn't reflected immediately, and that's the lag from when you hit the button and do it. Now, I must admit, having just a virtual table, guys, for so long without real tables, I could play it and get used to it, and the brain just compensates. It really does. Like it's gone. The lag is gone. Now that I have real pinball tables, I can tell the lag's there like every single time, and it's actually harder. It seems to be harder for me to actually dial it out, and that's probably because I keep going back to the real pinballs and coming back, and it just frustrates me. So, funnily enough, low input lag isn't the same as like pixel refresh, and it's not the same as the vertical scan refresh rate either. So often, well, nearly always, there's not actually any specific input lag figures released, but you can go to certain websites and look it up on Google where people will actually track different monitor different models, and they will tell you how much input lag each one has and which one's the best. So I've gone onto those website, guys, and tried to find for that particular aspect, I'm trying to find ones with really low input lag, and the biggest problem I keep finding again and again and again is size. So getting the right screen size with one with low input lag. But anyway, it's a combination of all those things that are going to provide a couple of things. The low input lag, but the high vertical refresh rate is going to allow the ball to move around the table without juddering, and that's going to give it a nice smooth feel. And there is a website out there, guys, called Blur Busters, and I would recommend you go check it out because they've got little tests that you can use on your screen to see exactly how blurry it is and what refresh rate it is running. Of course, if you don't lock your frame rate to your refresh rate, so if I'm running 60 frame, on a 60 hertz monitor, which is what I'm doing right now, or a 60 hertz screen, and I let the video card go above that, when it's actually doing more frames in the game, you might think that's a better thing, but what happens there is you start getting screen tearing. So people tend to lock the frame rate that the game is producing to the vertical refresh, so like lock it to 60 frames a second, and then it's perfectly in sync and things won't tear. But others have reported that even locking it at the maximum frame rate can actually increase some of your input lag as well. And guys, there is so much in this particular topic that I don't want to profess to be an expert in it. I know enough just to know sort of what to look for in relation to good, but I don't want to get into the ins and outs of the technicalities of it. I think that there's a lot of good information out there that you should check on, but you do need to be cautious of what is the input lag in total. And the pixel refresh thing is not a huge thing, but it will have an impact, I think, on the ability to be nice and smooth. As well as the vertical refresh rate. And I say that with the pixel thing because clearly if it's taking a long time for a pixel to go from one color to another, then that surely must introduce some level of blurriness. A small tiny fraction of amount, and half the time you're not going to see it, right? Some people are more susceptible to this stuff, guys, but for me, and sorry, that was really sort of long and all over the place, but for me, the screen is so important as the biggest upgrade on this. It's the thing that you see, it's the thing you watch, it's the thing that has an impact on your inputs. Pinball is all about fast, rapid response and being able to hit that ball when you want to hit it. You don't want to go from a real pinball machine to your virtual cab and it be a little bit like mine right now, which has got 0.4 of a second delay, 0.3 or something, and that's detectable, guys. That's 300 milliseconds or so, and that's 300 or 400 milliseconds, and that's a lot. So anyway, there's those things to think about, and then of course there is all the FreeSync, or adaptive Visa sync, or it's the Visa standard. I think it's called adaptive sync, which is similar to FreeSync, that works with AMD graphics cards. My God. And G-Sync, which works with NVIDIA. Now, what is it? It's basically if the, this again is going to be a simple version of the true explanation of it, I'm sure. But if the frame rate, I mean, if I'm locking frames at 60 frames a second, and it comes down, like the computer can't actually generate 60 frames, then it goes into like an adaptive refresh rate, where I believe the way it happens is the graphics card is almost sort of going, okay, well, you can only make like 50 frames right now, so I'm going to change the refresh rate of the monitor to match your 50 frames that the computer is generating, and therefore avoid the tearing and keep it nice and smooth as maximum as possible up to 50 frames. I hope that makes sense, guys. Clearly it makes even more sense when you get up to like 120 frames, that's your max, and your computer can't quite get there, you might be 100, 110, then the adaptive sync, or FreeSync for the AMD cards, or the G-Sync will help lock those refresh rates in with the how many frames are being generated. That was way more complex than I wanted it to be in terms of explanation, but hopefully that makes sense. Look, there's other screen technologies. You've got the OLEDs and the QLEDs and stuff, and all those have different impacts on the ability to have certain refresh rates and input lag and all the rest of it. The other thing is 1080p or 4K. Now, this was something I was struggling with initially, because often when you go to 4K, the input lag is a lot higher on those particular panels, so then you're going to sort of suffer for the high resolution. The other thing is that pushing 4K of pixels around ends up having an impact on your maximum frames that the card can actually output, and therefore it may not meet a higher vertical refresh. So let's just break that down, right? So if I'm doing if I've got a 120 hertz screen and I could really max out at 120 frames per second, that would be awesome and nice and super smooth. But if I'm running a table at 4K that can't keep up with that, then the adaptive sync or G-Sync is going to kick in to try and make it smooth at lower frame rates. And if the screen doesn't support G-Sync or FreeSync, only supports 120 frames, then it's not going to keep up. And it's going to, I think it's going to stutter in that occasion unless you drop the refresh rate down. Oh, guys, seriously, I really do apologise if a lot of this is just all over the place, but I'm hoping you're getting a few things out of it. What's the bottom line? What is the bottom line? I'm going flat. I'm going 43 inch. I want to do the 4K for a bit more of a future proofing, because to put the 43 inch in here, guys, I am literally going to cut into the side of the cabinet and slot this thing in so it's absolutely flush, because I want it low. I don't want it on the top. And some people put their screens on the top and they cut they route the top of the table and they stick it flush. I don't want that, guys. I want it down, because I want to put all the Cree lighting and other effect lighting around the table. I want it deep. I want it to make it look like a real table. So that's going to be tough doing that, but how it's going to be the right size and with the apron, for me, that's got to be the size. So 43 inch, 4K for future proofing. If I have to run things in 1080p, then so be it, until I can beef up the card and the PC. The IPS or the LCD tech is neither here nor there in a way, because the viewing angles on just typical LCD or the later LCD type technology panels is actually very good. IPS though does have better. It has like 178 degree viewing angles, and you want that to maintain all your colours. I know, as I said with this one, if you look right down or look from the top, the colours tend to shift slightly, and it's definitely improved because I tweaked the hell out of it, and got it sort of really bright and vivid. But an IPS would be very, very bright. I'm going to lose some of the contrast though, guys, so some of the blacks won't be as black, but it's going to be bright. I can have lights, strong on it if I need to, and it's going to actually really, really pop. So yeah, 120 hertz. IPS, 43-inch 4K low input lag with the ability to have FreeSync or G-Sync, preferably, given the fact that I've got an NVIDIA card currently. One final thing on all of that, guys, is look out for the TVs that actually say they do 120 hertz. When they actually don't, they have this this trick of motion smoothing and stuff to get a perceived 120, and it's actually horrible. It's actually a sort of a frame smoothing or guessing thing in between that it works out, and it's actually horrible, and it really makes input lag even worse. So you have to be sure. Down the track, surely there'll be more panels come out, and there'll be more off-the-shelf panels come out, so you might want to wait. That might be an option for you. But I can't stress enough that doing the research on the panels that you're thinking about is critically important for your build. Okay guys, next up, there's a lot to talk about, right? It's a lot to talk about. Next up is force feedback. So the first thing to consider is nudging. Now, I touched on the fact that the accelerometer that I have, which will detect movement, is part of the Virtual Pin board for the plunger. Now, you can get other boards, I believe, that are just accelerometers on their own. The bottom line here is, though, guys, is if you're building a cab, then plan for an accelerometer. Don't put nudge buttons on your cab like your full-size cab. I mean, it's fine on a controller and stuff, and like a sit-down, more of a pin-shaped controller. But if you're building a full-size cab, I think one of the key reasons for doing that is your ability to move the cab like you would a real pinball machine. And I tell you what, there's nothing more immersive braking than trying to nudge the table and the ball doesn't nudge with it on software. That kills it for me. It absolutely kills it. I can't play like that. And that's why it was so cool to get some workarounds going with Pinball FX3, because I thought without that, it would kill it. I didn't want to use buttons to do that. So get an accelerometer, definitely, and set it up for your nudge if you're doing a full-size table. Then we look at other force feedback things like the knocker, the shaker motor. There's a wiper motor, which has a slightly sort of whirring sound for those sort of mechanical things that move across the play field. With strobe lights, we have other solenoids, not just the knocker, but solenoids also possible for kicking off with bumpers. Now I have the knocker, I have the shaker motor, I've got strobes, I've got the wiper motor, and I've got extra real bright high Cree lighting around the edge here of the table. And I've got 3 up one side and 2 down the other side. And the reason why I position that way is because they often lined up with pretty much where main flashes are on most pinball tables. It's just funny how that is. But that's very close on a lot of tables, especially in the 90s. But the bottom line is that these things flash really, really bright. Again, you won't detect it very much like the DMD. You won't see it as much in the video, but they're super bright, guys, and they spill light over on top of the screen as you're playing. It just gives the illusion of depth. It gives the illusion that this isn't a virtual table, that it's actually, part real. So those things currently are all firing off and firing off through the direct output framework again, which hooks into PinMain, which is then used off VPX. But there are ways of actually enabling that in other software like Pinball FX3, which we'll get to later on with everything here that we have to cover. So what's controlling all of that? Well, the LED, I've got a LED was that actually controlling when these things fire, but the LED isn't actually connected to any of that stuff. The LED has actually got a little couple of ribbon cables coming off it, which then go into the Zeb's booster board, which I've got, and that booster board has an external power source because running these shakers and wiper motors and these Cree lights, it sucks a lot of current, and you try and do that off the back straight off the LED whiz, you just blow the LED whiz up. So I have used this Zeb's board, boost board. Now there's other ways of doing it, and you can look up there's other solutions. There's one particular I can't remember offhand now, which is a similar sort of solution For me, the Zeb's board is awesome because it just does everything. And it also will allow me to add additional solenoids and contactors if I want to. So with all of that, guys, what are the changes that I'm going to do? Now, remembering that the plunger is also part of that whole sort of force feedback thing with the accelerometer. So I'm putting in the Zeb's board plunger as a replacement. What I will be doing around here for lighting is I'm going to do, if you guys check out Terry Red's channel, because he's just awesome when it comes to doing all the DOF stuff and incredible lighting and the display on the top for the on top of the back box. He's something else. You need to check out his channel. But he's got these LED matrices that go around. I think Randar has them as well. He's another guy on the pinball forums who's right into this, extremely knowledgeable on it. But anyway, these lighting matrices that go around the outside, I want to add that. And originally, guys, I didn't want to, because I thought actually this is killing it in terms of those lights don't appear on a real machine. But one thing that I have learnt after having a virtual pin for so long and having real pinballs, guys, is that I've realised that virtual pin will always be virtual pin. It's just not going to be real. And because of that, there are things, all this extra feedback and stuff helps with the immersion, but it doesn't hurt to put other things in there that will help with the immersion that don't necessarily appear on real pinball tables. And I think that the matrix with the extra lighting effects that will generate is going to help again with the overall immersion, even though it's virtual. So I want to put those in, as well as the Cree lights where they are right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that in terms of total control. I should be able to, because I'm pretty much mirroring what's going on here with the same Cree lights which are up in the topper. So we'll see, guys. But I definitely want to get those LED arrays. The other thing is that I only have the one solenoid for the knocker, but I want to get the contactors definitely for the contactors or solenoids, and I need to look up which ones to get. Definitely for the flippers. Without a doubt, I think that's one of the biggest things I miss when I come and play virtual pin. Now I've got real pinball machines, you hit the flipper button, you don't get the nice chunky solenoid sound. I think those firing off for real would just be awesome. And then I think a selection of contactors or solenoids set up in an array around where bumpers would normally be. Now that's sometimes difficult because you get some, bumpers like Adam's family, they're down here on the left hand side and not necessarily up there. So I need to figure out maybe if it needs to be more sort of central for those, but maybe that's where I put those contactors. Now that will actually be in conjunction with 7.1 sound, which we'll talk about later, which will help with that immersion factor for in terms of sounds. But in terms of real mechanical sounds, that is what I'm going to be adding. That's the upgrades that we're going to do. We're also going to, I mentioned very early on, we're going to put the Connect sensor in there from the Xbox and have that hooked up through BAM. That software will then allow us to get a pseudo 3D effect. I really want to try it out, guys, because it's sort of the halfway point between that and VR. But eventually, guys, that's what I want to do. And I think even having the VR, and it'd be such a shame with the really nice screen, won't be using that with VR, but with VR you're still using everything else in relation to the real cabinet, the real feel, the ability to nudge still, the controllers, the plunger and everything, and having that in VR would still be awesome. And of course, you need to consider that, guys. I mean, if you're just a sort of a VR player, that might be the sort of option that you do. And if you did that, you pretty much can just have a cut-off part of a pinball machine against the wall. You don't need a full pinball table. But I think in the way that I've played this over the years, when people come into the arcade, when people want to play pinball with you, you don't want to be putting a VR headset on. And it's just, that's why Connect, I think, would be pretty cool, even though the person watching it's going to have a bit of a weird view. But at least you sort of can all see, it's sort of just going on. You don't have a thing on your face. Going to be interesting. Going to be interesting how Connect works out. So moving on to the PC. The PC in this, guys, currently, it's old. Now, I thought I'd have a look at the specs for you guys, because a lot of you have asked, and I constantly just say, hey, it's old, don't worry about it. And it is old. And it's actually an Intel Core 2 Quad Q6600, which is a Kentsfield chip from 2007. 2007, guys. It's a 2.4 gigahertz quad core, effectively. Now, interestingly, I mean, it does really well. Surprisingly, it does actually really, really well. But clearly it's a bottleneck, and I'm running it with an old, motherboard. It's a Gigabyte P35 DQ6. It's old. It's old. And it's only got 4 gig of RAM, guys. And part of that is because it's still running actually Windows 32-bit, even Windows 10, but 32-bit. Can't actually address anything more than 4 gig. It's got a 1080 GTX 1080 NVIDIA card in there, which I think is eating up. I just have to share the video RAM. I think how it has to do it, it's got to swap the main video RAM with the RAM that's on the card. I think there's a duplication thing there, and that often causes me issues in terms of available RAM. And I have to dial down in Visual Pinball some of the settings, which has an impact on RAM. Anyway, it's a disaster. It needs to change. I'm using the onboard sound, so I'm getting sound just through the 2 speakers, which are quite loosely just stacked behind the back there. I always wanted to get back that and fix it. It is running a SSD, which was an upgrade I did on a video a long time ago now, which fixed a whole lot of other issues that I was having at the time with a failing hard drive. And of course, an SSD is appropriate, guys, if you've got your PC in the cab, because you move this sucker around, you're going to be shaking that hard drive up. And that's probably what killed my first one. And of course, whenever the shaker motor goes off in this cabinet, my God, it shakes the cabinet to hell. So if you've got a normal hard drive in there, you're going to kill it, like pretty much I did. So that brings me on to another point, guys. Clearly I want to update the entire PC. The only thing I'm going to keep is the 1080 card in there. We'll see how that runs. Maybe it's not going to be able to push the 4K tables around to the, up to the 120 hertz refresh rate. We'll have to see. If not, we'll have to drop it back to 1080. Maybe I'll look at another updated card. I've got a TI, a 1080 Ti, and the other one, which again, it's got quite a bit of an uplift. Currently, this cabinet has been, in fact, I didn't talk about this when I talked about the cabinet, but this cabinet does have 2 big 12-inch fans sitting on the bottom, which I cut out of the bottom of the cabinet, and that's drawing cold air in, and it goes around the cabinet here and back up the back box and out the back of the back box. It generates a bit of heat in there. Clearly, that entire PC is going to be upgraded. Now, what is it going to be upgraded to, guys? I haven't looked yet. I need to start looking. I need to look at the motherboard, the right processor. I need at least 16 gigs of RAM. God, even the speed of all that RAM is going to be so much faster than what I have now. So I need to do some research there, guys. So I'll get back to you once I do that. I'll be looking for something with a 7.1 surround sound option, and that's the other thing that I will be adding to this. There is now surround sound feedback, they call it. It's almost like the poor man's DOF. So instead of having all the hardware with shaker motors and all the rest of it, you have surround sound. And the way that the 7.1 is set up is that you've got your bass, your 2 speakers are dedicated for your DMD sounds, and then the remaining 4 for each corner of the table. And then what happens is, as the ball moves around on the table, the speakers will send the ball rolling sound between the 4 speakers to positionally show where the ball is. Well, not show, but you'll be able to hear where the ball is on the table. And then whenever anything triggers off on the table, it does exactly the same thing in terms of positional audio by triggering those 4. And it's separate from the sound coming from the back box, guys. That again is incredible to me, because it's something I haven't even really considered. And all my sounds are coming out, just those 2 speakers at the back and a subwoofer, which is in the cabinet itself. to have that positional sound as well as real solenoids and stuff going off, I think that's just going to bring the immersion factor, guys, up to level 11. It's going to be incredible, I think. So I'm really looking forward to that, but I'm going to need to get the 7.1 card. I'm going to need to get 7.1 set of speakers. I'm tossing up if I should put the sub, leave the sub in the cabinet or put it down underneath. I think like a decent, really decent sub and put it underneath would be awesome. I love the sound in pinball machines, guys, and I know it's not high fidelity, but the cleaner and the nice, you know, the clarity and volume, getting that as well as bass, that again just brings the virtual tables up to a whole nother level. And I think with positional sound, you're going to need that clarity of sound. So guys, that's another big job, and I'm going to need to think about that carefully and get that stuff. And I've got to think about the order of all this, because I can't put the screen in without sorting out that positional sound first. So anyway, I'm going to have to think about that in terms of sequencing the upgrades. All right, so that's all in terms of hardware upgrades. We are now going to talk about the last thing, which is the software. Running Windows 10, as I mentioned before, currently the 32-bit version. I'm running the Pinball X front end. Highly recommend it, guys. Get to know that software, put it on, launch all your tables through it. That software supports the ability to load things prior to running particular tables. You can load Pinball FX 3 tables direct, straight from that front end. You don't have to go through Pinball FX front end and navigate through that, which is on a cabinet. It's really annoying. So you can get straight to it. You can run programs like the DMD EXT program to run your real DMD prior to running Pinball FX 3. Again, it supports all that stuff. So Pinball FX 3, awesome. My main software is still Visual Pinball X, Visual Pinball 10 VPX, and these are all VPX tables currently. But again, as you guys would know, they've been watching the channel, so excited for Pinball FX3 from Zen, and I am playing all their tables as well, having them on a separate list. You can do that through the front end and separate your lists and stuff. So those are my two key go-to software in terms of actually playing games. Other than that, VPX relies on a separate piece of software called PinMame, and PinMame has different versions to support the different DMDs up to different levels of year and types of DMD, and that of course is PinMame, so that works pretty much silently with VPX to do the DMDs. And then I have the DOF direct output framework, which then links into the PinDMD software, so that when it's triggering certain events, the DOF framework then triggers the LEDWIZ to then fire up things like the Cree, the shaker motor, the wiper motor, and so that's how all those things sort of link together. And again, guys, maybe when we get into software in a little bit more detail on another future episode. So that's cool. Same with DOF links. That gives me the direct output framework effects with the lighting and the shaker motor and stuff with programs like Pinball FX3 that don't support that stuff natively. So that's a way of getting those effects. And I mentioned DMD EXT, which again is the same thing. It allows me to use that real DMD with programs like Pinball FX3. So those are the key ones, and then I'm using X360CE, which is doing the emulation of the buttons, as I mentioned earlier, to keyboard presses. So that's pretty much all the software, the key software I can think about, guys. Again, we will look at that another day in a little bit more detail. Anyway, that, guys, is it in terms of an overview, all the key parts of the virtual cab. And look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers, guys.